In this video, I'm running down the top 10 unread books in my collection. Number 8 will surprise you. Welcome back to Comics Are Dope. I'm BJ Kicks, and in this video, I'm running down my top 10 unread books in my collection. They're gonna range from like kind of surprising to absurd. You're gonna be like, how in the world have you not read this comic yet? But if there's one thing I've learned in this hobby, there's a quote that says collecting comics and reading comics are two entirely different hobbies. And so over the last 3 years, I've been in comics about 5 years, but over the last 3 years, I have been like sort of feverishly collecting omnibus and hardcovers and basically buying all the stories that everyone tells you gotta read when you get into comics. And I can't lie, I'm surprised at how many of these books I still have not read. And what makes it even worse is the fact that I own all of these books I'm about to show you. So I'm going to run down the top 10. They're not really in any particular order, but I promise some of these choices are shocking. In fact, I have more than 10 that are unread. So I got 2 honorable mentions, and we're going to go ahead and start the list off hot with the first honorable mention. And that is this. This is the yellow, blue, gray, and white colors collection by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale over at Marvel. Marvel Comics don't get a ton of love in my collection. Like, I collect all things X-Men, but the overall Marvel universe, I just tend to find just kind of difficult to get into. I have some of my favorite characters, but they've got like these storied runs. Like if I want to get into Incredible Hulk, they're like, oh, read Peter David. If you want to get into Spider-Man, they're like, oh, read the McFarlane run or read the the Roger Stern run is what I was thinking of, or the JMS run or the Dan Slott run. And all these runs just are forever long. If you want to get into Captain America, oh, read Ed Brubaker's run. It's only 5 omnis. This book contains 4 short stories in the lives of each of these characters. I think the most famous and critically acclaimed of which is Spider-Man Blue. And I love this creative team. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale wrote The Long Halloween. I loved Long Halloween. I loved the art. I've even got a trade paperback copy of Daredevil Yellow that I've thumbed through, and I love the art in this. These series are like super critically acclaimed, but I just have not made the time to read them yet. Specifically in the case of Spider-Man Blue, I felt like I didn't want it to be my first Spider-Man story, but it's probably going to be my first major Spider-Man story. So first honorable mention, the Colors series by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. I'm probably going to have to crack this open really soon. The next honorable mention, to all disappointing of my homie Omnibuddy, is this. This is Usagi Yojimbo. This is the Dark Horse Saga Volume 1 or Book 1. Now, Usagi Yojimbo is supposedly famous for you being able to jump in at any point in the history. And, when I got into comics, the Usagi Yojimbo hardcovers were like the most coveted thing in the world. And they had just reprinted the hardcover Volume 1. And I thought, oh, they're going to reprint all of it. They didn't reprint all of it, but they reprinted all of it in trade paperbacks. And so I bought almost all of these trade paperbacks, as well as the Fantagraphics slipcase collecting the first Usagi adventures. All that said, I've not read a single issue of any of this Usagi Yojimbo stuff. I did read the Usagi Yojimbo Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover that they just recently did in single issues. I loved that, which makes me want to get into this more. But it's black and white. It's kind of thick. Like, I just haven't been as interested in getting into this as perhaps I should have been before I decided to pull the trigger and buy 9 freaking volumes of this book. So that's the other honorable mention. Now, let's get into the list of some of the most surprising books in my collection that I have not read. And we'll start with this massive tome. This is Injustice, Volume 1. The omnibus. This was, I think, my second omnibus purchase. I bought Batman by Grant Morrison Volume 1, and then shortly after, I bought this. And this is one of the most, like, revered comics. This is one of those, like, oh, this is the book that got me into comics. This famously got channel sponsor JP, Organic Price Books, into comics. And yeah, I still haven't read it at all. I've played through the entire video game, but never read this comic. So there we go. Number 10. I guess we're all going to just count them down. Might as well. Now, the next book that I think is super surprising that I haven't read. Like I said, Marvel doesn't get a ton of love in my collection, but Civil War. Civil War is one of those stories that people were like, oh, it's just one of the greatest Marvel stories ever. You got to read it. You got to read it. So I grabbed this hardcover at the Ultimate Comics live show during the pandemic. I think I paid like either $20 or $40 for it. Pretty sure it was 20, considering cover price on this is only 35. And I love the Civil War movie, but I have not read this comic. In fact, I've not even opened the hardcover. So there's that. Civil War coming in at number 9, I guess. The next book that I have not read, and it is a Marvel book as well, Fantastic Four by Jonathan Hickman. Now, you guys know what got me into comics was the House of X and Powers of 10 miniseries crafted by Jonathan Hickman. Hickman's X-Men, although kind of just ended up being disappointing. It's kind of floundered until he decided to do Inferno and leave. But everybody's like, oh, I love Hickman because I love his Fantastic Four and his Avengers and Secret Wars and blah, blah, blah. So this was one of the most acclaimed comics when I got into comics. And when they reprinted this last year, I was super excited about it. Haven't read a single issue of it, despite the fact that I had even bought this entire run in trade paperbacks before the hardcovers were reprinted. I don't know, man. Hickman's Fantastic Four. What's that, number 8? All right, so at number 7, surprising books I haven't read. We're getting into classics. This is Daredevil Born Again. And this kind of represents the entire Daredevil run by Frank Miller. But Born Again, written by Frank Miller, art by David Mazzucchelli, which famously is the same team behind Batman Year One. This is this was a trade paperback that was gifted to me by my homie Bunkmaster B. But this is one of those stories that they're like, hey, you should get into this. You should read, if you're going to read Daredevil, you got to read Frank Miller's Daredevil. It changed the game, blah, blah, blah. I've not read it, like, at all. So there we go. This probably should have been in the honorable mention section. I feel like this isn't as surprising as, say, Injustice, but Daredevil Born Again. I haven't read it. Number six, book that I haven't read. This probably doesn't really need to be this high on the list, but Arkham Asylum. Serious House on Serious Earth. This is Grant Morrison's first work on Batman. It's an original graphic novel. And this is what made him a household name. This is known for bringing more darkness to Batman and just being super mysterious. It's got art by Dave McKean. So if you're familiar with that sort of really surreal and creepy style, now we've seen people like Liam Sharp who use this style. What's my man's name from, the Department of Truth? Werther Dell'Edera? Is that the guy from Department of Truth? But anyway, Bill Sienkiewicz, stuff like that. This is a super famous graphic novel that if you're a Batman fan, you probably should read at some point. I just haven't brought myself to do it yet. So super dark tones, and I just haven't been in the mood for darkness as of late. Funny that my favorite character is the Dark Knight. So that's another one. Speaking of Dark Knights, next up on the list, Dark Knight's Metal. This is a trade paperback written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. Basically, from what I understand, the Scott Snyder Batman run kind of concludes, or the big event from that era is this, Dark Knight's Metal. And it's this Batman versus this dark multiverse of evil Batmen, and the Batman who laughs, and so on and so forth. What's even more absurd is I've read the sequel to this. I've read Death Metal, but I've not read Dark Knight's Metal. What's funny is this trade paperback isn't even mine. My wife bought this during a going out of business sale at a local comic shop in our area. And it was actually Fight or Flight Comics, which is now merged with Ultimate Comics Raleigh. But anyway, my wife bought this, read it in one day, and loved it. And I've still not read a single issue of Dark Knight's Metal, because I feel like I got to read the entire Batman by Snyder and Capullo run first. So there we go. Dark Knight's Metal. What's that? Number 5? All right. So now we're getting into the absurd, just ridiculous. How have you not read these books? And coming in at number 4, The Death of Superman. I have never read The Death of Superman. Now, The Death of Superman, Death and Return of Superman might have been like in the top 2 most wanted omnibus reprints. And this is like the story of all Superman stories. People are like, oh, if you haven't read a Superman story, read this. This will make you love Superman. And I've read a bunch of Superman since, but I've never read The Death and Return of Superman, The Reign of the Supermen, the debut of Steel. None of those things have I read. I'm a fraud. Now, I'm not a real comic book fan because I've not read The Death and Return of Superman. I bought the omnibus. Yeah, I mean, I love that I have it. I know like the iconic moments, the little fold out page, the man's dead. I've watched the movie, The Death of the Superman, The Reign of the Supermen, but I've not read Death and Return of Superman. So there's that. Coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3. Probably the most absurd or third most absurd that I have not read. It's got to be Invincible. I have had like 50 first dates with Invincible. For whatever reason, they reprint issue number 1 of this a lot. And so I've got actually right here, I've got this little gold deluxe edition they did with the foil cover back when they'd introduced the animated series. So I got this one. I've got this Free Comic Book Day Invincible number 1 reprint. I've even got this from the Image First program. You can get the dollar copy of Invincible number 1. And every time I read it, I love it. I love the first issue of Invincible. The fact that he's at Reginald VelJohnson High School, the fact that the principal looks like Reginald VelJohnson, like the fact that each story arc is named after a classic sitcom. That alone is hilarious. The story in issue 1 is super compelling. This teenager getting powers, learning that his dad's a superhero, and just like, hey man, why am I such a late bloomer? Like, that's cool. Even like some of the stuff that happens in like the follow-up issues. So I've read like the first 3 or 4 issues of Invincible. It's really good. The fact that I just never continued the rest of it, it's kind of absurd. So Invincible, the fact that I've not read Invincible and I won't watch the Invincible animated series because I haven't read Invincible is crazy. And that's why it's at the number 3 spot. All right. So we have finally gotten to the top 2, the 2 most absurd books in my collection. The books that you're like, yo, seriously, like you're a comic fan and you not read these books. And I don't know what to tell you. Again, I'm a fraud. So the first book or the second book, the number 2 book in the collection that I've not read, that I think people would be like, are you serious right now? Dark Knight Returns. I have read the first issue of The Dark Knight Returns. Loved it. I've watched the entire 2-part animated features of The Dark Knight Returns. Enjoyed that. But I've never read the 4-issue, just 4 issues, 4-issue miniseries written and drawn by Frank Miller with inks by Klaus Janson, colors by Lynn Varley, who was Frank Miller's wife for a while. Are they still married? I don't know. I've never read this book. Never read Dark Knight Returns. Never read the follow-ups. Never read Dark Knight Strikes Again. The Master Race. None of it. I own all of it, but I have read none of it. None of it. Well, I read issue 1 of The Dark Knight Returns. That big epic Superman fight, never seen it. That weird lady with the swastikas on her chest, never seen that either. Only read the first issue and seen Harvey Dent get cured and then go evil. And that's it. So, one of the greatest Batman stories of all time, I've not read. And hey, if you can believe that I've never read this, then you'll have no problem believing the number 1 comic on this list of unread comics in my collection. It's Watchmen. I have never read Watchmen. I've tried to read Watchmen. I got a Dollar Comics copy of issue number 1, and it was cool. I started watching the movie, the Zack Snyder movie, which is basically shot for shot. I fell asleep on it. And then I tried to revisit this with this trade paperback. Never read it. I bought it. I bought this copy when Doomsday Clock finally wrapped up. And I was like, ooh, Doomsday Clock looks interesting. Oh, wait, I've never read Watchmen. I should read Watchmen. This book changed the way we look at superheroes and comics in general, and changed Alan Moore's life forever. I guess for the worse, for the better. What are we counting that as? This is probably it's got to be in the top 5 most important comics in history. It's got to be like Action Comics #1, Detective Comics 27, Watchmen #1. It's got to be the 3 most important comics in comic book history. Never, ever read it. So I read the first issue though. I saw the dude fall over the thing and I zoom in on the smiley face pen. And yeah, you know what? It was this. I got to this first little section of like not comics. And I was like, what is this? Am I supposed to read all this? And never got past it. So Watchmen is the top unread book in my collection. And I honestly don't see myself reading it anytime soon. So what's this list look like for you? I know I'm not the only one who has classic comics in their collection that they haven't read. Let me know which ones you haven't read. And also let me know which ones you think I need to read ASAP. There's like a 12 comic challenge going around social media, and you're supposed to like get 12 recommendations and read 1 graphic novel a month for the whole year of 2024. I'm thinking of putting that out. I'll probably put it on the community tab, but you guys have a head start. Let me know which comic in this list I should read first. And it's crazy because there are a bunch of comics that I did not mention. Like, I'll save those for another video. How about that? Look, huge shout out to the channel family for making this video possible. This, of course, was part of the 25 Days of Comics, which is sponsored by Organic Priced Books. If you are looking for any of the stories I just mentioned, you can actually grab almost all of them are in print right now. You can grab them at organicpricebooks.com. If you use my discount code BJKicks for $2 off your order of a few books, or if you're ordering a big bulk order for Christmas, 4 books or more, well, then you can use the code BJKicks, ship it together. You'll save 5% on your entire purchase, and that purchase will help the channel out. So huge thanks to Organic Price Books, and a huge thanks to you for watching. I'll see you guys in another video real soon. Till then, stay safe, stay awesome, and read something dope today from your unread pile. Peace.